Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 125. So glad you could join me. Today's guest is Amanda Newell, the winner of our 2021 Rattle Chapbook Prize for her book, I Will Pass Even to Acheron. She'll be joining us in about 15 minutes, but before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you love poetry too, so please do click the like button and share and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications wherever you're listening to this. There's something you can do to help spread the poetry around. That's all we ask of you. Like almost everything we do at Rattle, these Rattlecasts are free, but we do ask you to help spread it around, so please do that if you would. Now, we're going to start out with Poets Respond Live, like we usually do, and we have two poets this week, so let's get right to it. I'm going to start with Tuesday's poet. Robert Hunter Jones has a poem, and he's in Vienna, so I wasn't sure if I could get in touch with him in time, and last week's poem was also about the coronavirus, so I figured that we would do The Frozen America first as a Sunday poem. But this is a really... a poem that's fitting for right now, too. This is New Year's Eve in Vienna. And let's talk to Robert Hunter Jones right now. Hey, Robert, you are live on the air. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us all the way from Vienna, where you are. And I looked at your bio. I think I looked at your website, which we have a link to under the poem. And you're from the Pacific Northwest. So how did you end up in Vienna? Let me just ask you that first.
That's a long story, but I came over here to teach first in '85 at a little school over near Salzburg, and I just kind of kept coming back between, I was working for the National Park Service doing fire stuff, and come over here in the winter to try to do some writing, and that eventually led to a job at the American International School here in Vienna, where I taught for 27 years.
Very
Just retired in 2019.
Yeah, it's very cool to see. It was an interesting jump in the bio there. And this poem, New Year's Eve in Vienna, is, of course, about the pandemic and Omicron coming through. Do you want to just explain, first of all, like just what the situation is like in there? How does it feel in Vienna right now?
Well, we had a big spike in cases, a little ahead of most of Europe and certainly ahead of the U.S., and that was before the Omicron came through, so it's pretty hot here right now, but Vienna is coming off of a hard lockdown, and so now our caseload is a little bit down, but we're expecting it to trend up. And like everywhere else, there are those who are not that thrilled with the way the state is responding to the virus, but I think, it's a moving target, and people are doing the best they can.
Yeah, so why don't you introduce your poem a little bit? So what was the impetus for this poem? You explain it in the note, which people will see when they read the poem on Tuesday. But do you want to set it up for us?
Sure. Our son just came back from college in the Pacific Northwest a couple of weeks ago, and actually got his booster shot on the way home from the airport, and we went off for skiing. And with the new variant, of course, we were all a little nervous about any kind of social interaction. But after we got home, he went out and he came back and found out from his friends that one of the people at the party was positive, and then we just tested every day to see what would happen, and lo and behold, he came up positive a few days ago. So that's what the poem speaks to, I guess, at a literal level, but that's what prompted it.
Yeah, and how's everybody doing now? Does anybody, how are your symptoms and all that? Are you, it's only your son who's sick, right, at the moment?
Yeah, light symptoms. Actually, we just really less than a minute ago the testing here is great, so you can test every day and it comes to your phone, and we just got news that the rest of us are still negative. And, everybody wants to be positive except with the virus, so we're happy to be negative on that. And so far, so good. It's actually my daughter's 18th birthday, and
oh, wow, happy birthday to her, yeah.
Some friends having a celebration, pretty muted one, and that's just the way it is here these days. But so far, so good.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting time. I mean, it feels like, after 2 years of waiting, this is, the pandemic is coming home to a lot of people right now for the first time. So we're sort of, I mean, everyone's going to get infected in the next month pretty much because this is so contagious. I don't think there's any way around it. So it's I don't know, it's a strange time where everything's accelerating so rapidly. But anyway, let's hear your poem, New Year's Eve in Vienna. Why don't you go ahead and read it for everybody?
Sure. New Year's Eve in Vienna. In the waning days of the year, Omicron entered my son, who entered our home at 5 a.m. with his slightly bent key, quietly taking his tiny guest to bed with him, sleeping soundly until 2 p.m. I don't think it's love, greedy little microbe from a broken home. You have to feel sorry almost. You have to question the nature of friendship, the value of social niceties, little bridges of desire riding the common exchanges of breath between words. Laughter in the small hours before dawn, a little forced, a little too loud. Now we wait. Who falls, who coughs up all the names of casual contacts, little parlor game of memory. In the meantime, strangers trundle by beyond the windows, their own little burdens in tow, dirty snow crowning the curbstones.
Yeah, beautiful metaphors and images in that poem. Just it's like I was saying to you on the email. I keep thinking that we're probably done with coronavirus poems because like how much more can you say? We've probably published 50 of them over the last 2 years. But this one finds a new way to think about how a virus moves through a population. It's really interesting. Symbolism here and great visuals too. Thanks for sharing that, Robert.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, stay healthy and hope you have a good happy birthday to your daughter.
All the best to you as well.
Yep, take care. Bye.
Thanks again. Bye.
Yeah, that was Robert Hunter Jones with New Year's Eve in Vienna, the Tuesday poem that we'll have coming up. And you can find more of Robert's work at Robert Hunter Jones. That's all just like you'd think, roberthunterjones.com. And look for that poem as the Tuesday poem in your inbox. If you aren't subscribed yet to Rattle, getting the daily poem, anybody, you can go to the Rattle's website. Somebody emailed me late last night and mentioned that that it's hard to find the sign up. So I moved it right here in the footer too. It's other places, but now it's here too. So if you want to get the daily poem in your inbox, go to rattle.com and just go down to the bottom and sign yourself up there. And we're back up to 7,324 newsletters or email subscribers. We had about 10,000, and then Google canceled their service we were using. And we're back up to 7,000, so that's good that people actually care about poetry. And those are all people who've signed up in the last 6 months, so it's really cool to see. Thanks, everybody, for that. And now let's move on to our second poem, which is actually today's poem, Frozen America. We're going to call up, Robert has ties to the Pacific Northwest, and here is a poet in the Pacific Northwest, Zinnia Hansen. Let's call her up right now and talk about her poem.
We're back at 7,000, so that's good that people actually care.
Oh, hey, Zinnia. I put yourself on mute or shut off your stream, so you're only talking to me through the phone. I can hear myself in the background. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay, much better. So Zinnia, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have you on the line, sharing and talking about this poem that you wrote, Frozen America. To start out, do you want to introduce just how the poem came to be, which you explain in your note, of course, but let everybody who's just listening know.
Yeah, so I was at my grandma's. We had gone over there for Christmas, and we got snowed in, and we were stuck for about 4 days. I wrote this poem towards the beginning of those 4 days, but it hardly ever snows in the Pacific Northwest where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And it's always a kind of a special treat when it does. But because of climate change, just like any unusual weather patterns freak me out and I get a little depressed. And so I had also gotten a copy of Best American Poetry 2021 in my stocking. So that was what that was a reference to. But yeah, I was reading a lot of poetry and feeling it move through me and just kind of, I don't know, my grandma's house is a very poetic place. It's really, really beautiful and it's just kind of been built up and it's full of artwork and things. So yeah, that was
Yeah, well, it's really cool to hear you
poetry
talk about the
season.
poetry flowing through, because that's what I loved about this poem, with the leaps that you took, and sort of surprising places and these cool images that just popped out of nowhere. Um, I don't know, and it's in a prose poem style. Do you usually write prose poems, or is it something that's different a little bit?
I started writing poetry last year.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I always wrote prose poetry. Like, that was really the only form that I wrote. But recently I've been trying to kind of use how the poem looks on the page to contribute to its meaning more. But this one, it just felt, I don't know, it kind of, the flow made sense as a prose poem. So yeah, it was fun to reconnect with that form.
Yeah, well, it's beautifully done. Let's hear it. Why don't you go ahead and read it for everybody?
Frozen America. I imagine my brand new copy of the Best American Poetry 2021 lying silent after the apocalypse. I'd like to remain conservative a little longer. Save seed for winter, watch it sprout in the spring. I break bread by myself, sitting on the floor, hunched over by the fire like God's last cat, watching it snow. I'm hoping another ice age will give us room to thaw again. Our Christmas tree this year was 13 feet tall. I was just grateful that I couldn't reach the top. Sometimes I want God to step out from the center of the sun, but other times I want him to stay there, pinned, the tallest branch stuffed up his ass. This winter, I've noticed how the sky grows blue every young night, how it's growing, inching that much closer to everything. I'm thinking about how close blue is to orange. I'm thinking about how the snow hasn't stopped falling, about how I want to make a perfume out of all our empty orange peels, about how the mountains will melt into mud. On the unfinished walls of the century-old warehouse my grandparents turned into a home are portraits of the salmon they caught. More than alive, the fish tread water in their frames, open mouths, a gateway to heaven. Glorious iconography. A paintbrush, a pen, a knife. As I walk through the storm, I look back and see the windows tinted red with light. Holy. The flags are flying, flopping like dying fish as they learn how to breathe. Who is going to cut a hole in the horizon and let out the frozen smoke?
Sorry. Yeah, that was Zinnia Hansen with Frozen America. Sorry, I was on mute for a second. But yeah, so I was just saying that the poem really touches on something that I think really important that people don't discuss enough, which is all the anxiety and stress that climate change produces in addition to the actual environmental damage itself. And so it's really great to have this poem and this perspective. So thanks for sharing this, Zinnia.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we're going to have to go to our main guest, but it's been great talking to you, and I will see you later.
See you later. Bye.
Bye. It was Zinnia Hansen with Frozen America. And now I got to jump over, put up some music here, and we'll be right back with today's main guest, Amanda Newell. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. As I mentioned, today's guest is 2021 Rattle Poetry Prize winner Amanda Newell, or Rattle Chapbook Prize winner, I should say. Amanda Newell won the Rattle Chapbook Prize for I Will Pass Even to Acheron, which is the chapbook that everybody received with their winter issue of Rattle. Her poetry has also appeared in Bellevue Literary Review, Gargoyle, Plume, Scoundrel Time, and elsewhere. A graduate of Warren Wilson's MFA program, she has received scholarships from the Loaf Writers Conference, the Frost Place, and a fellowship from the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Her first full-length collection is coming out too, Postmortem Say. It's forthcoming in 2023 from Červená Barva Press. And here she is, Amanda Newell. It's so great to talk to you, Amanda, after working through with the chapbook and everything else. It's just great to see you, first of all.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your Rattlecast today. It's such a fabulous series, and I'm delighted and honored to be here with you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to have you. Do you want to start out with a poem to get the ball rolling on what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. I'll start out with the first poem in the chapbook, which I think kind of sets the stage for the rest of the poems that come. It's called For Adam, My Student, and Walter Reed. Take one, says the sticky by the AFG decals, but I don't, although I want to, because really I have no claim to sacrifice, no stump swinging like a wind-wild bell, no appled fist, no marbled skin. Quite possibly, I'm imposing, no better than a driver slowing at the scene to count the bodies, the jellied patches of blood. Quite possibly, I mean to stand unblinking in the face of another's, your exquisite pain. I am wife, mother, sister, daughter of no one here. Whitman rushed towards the wounded, wrote how they piled around him, a heap of amputated feet, legs, arms, hands, mass casualties, and his longing, grief, a hunger that must be filled. These are not like other hospitals, he wrote, as with the homeless woman whose terrible cry peals in the street, God, please, someone give me something to eat. I run towards. I keep my hands open.
And that was the opening poem for Adam, My Student, and Walter Reed. And the thing about this book, which when we received it as we were reading the manuscripts for the Chapbook Prize, I mean, it was one of those books that was just so sort of polished and complete, and it just felt like it was done already. Like I was reading a book in my hand rather than just a manuscript, which is always a interesting feeling. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to know just more about the history of your relationship with Adam, though. It sort of jumps in halfway through a little bit, like where everything's already happened. Can you explain, set this, frame it a little bit of how you came to know Adam and how this chapbook came to be?
Sure. And I guess the first thing that I would say right off the bat is that, first of all, thank you for, thank you for your comments about the chapbook itself. And it was a long time in the making and went through actually many different iterations and was a runner-up in several other contests, never quite the winner. And so I until Rattle. And I think that I needed some more time to work on the poems, but I just wanted to, to fully realize them, and also wanted to say that it was a very long process, and like most poets, filled with rejection. As far as my relationship with Adam, so I taught at a small private school on the eastern shore of Maryland for about 15 years. Adam was one of my students there, and he was actually the nephew of one of my colleagues there in the humanities department. And so we were, as a small school, where we were, I think, very understandably, we were all very, as is typical, pretty close to our students. So Adam was no different. And one of the things that struck me about him as my student, he was, I taught him as a senior. He was determined that he wanted to enlist after graduation. And which he did, and so he went to boot camp out at 29 Palms, and then after he finished that, was pretty summarily deployed to Afghanistan. And so, and throughout his time as a student, he was always he loved literature. He and just loved reading and just absorbed it all, and was a fantastic student. And he did his senior thesis on the literature of war, primarily around World War I. So he was definitely fascinated with it, and I think like the whole mythology of war. He was a Latin student as well. So one day he actually came and asked me for a recommendation, and that's another poem that's in the book about that day. And I think what I'm getting to is that I started thinking about what is really my responsibility as a teacher. I think that's what, for Adam, my student, and Walter Reed, and not just my responsibility, but I think by extension our collective responsibility. When someone says, yeah, I want to go off to war, will you write me a recommendation so I can get in to X place or Y place? As a teacher, you want to support your students, of course, but it was after he was deployed and then hurt and nearly died, he had a command-controlled IED explode under his foot while he was driving a MATV. So that really started me kind of thinking about the responsibility and like, wow, this is something I need to kind of interrogate and investigate a little more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an interesting book in that it talks about a real person. And in most cases, you're always talking about how poetry, it's a truth that's bigger than facts or something like that is how I sort of explain it to people. But poetry, usually people are sort of archetypal characters that are drawn from the reality of the world and mixed together and composited. And this though is about Adam. Adam is the subject, and Adam's here by name. And did you have any reservations about having Adam involved so sort of directly and openly in the book, and what does Adam and his family think about it?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that I asked myself throughout the entire process. And I think part of that, the interrogation is when I say I'm wife, mother, sister, daughter of no one here, it's kind of asking that very question. What right do I have? This is not my trauma. So I think it is really hard to write about other people's trauma. And so I think that part of the exploration in the chapbook is trying to understand why I was so interested in it. And I think that gets back to what I mentioned earlier about feeling some responsibility for in some way for what happened. And of course, that's not like actually true in a literal sense, but I mean more sort of collectively, how we all sort of contribute, I think, to the mythos of war, and how maybe sometimes without thinking through how we're buying into that, into the narrative. So it forced me to ask some of those questions. As far as my relationship with Adam goes, he was aware throughout, and his family was aware of the poems, and I shared that with them throughout the process. So I felt, I think had they objected, I'm not sure how, if you would be seeing the poems as they are. I think it's as writers, it is such a hard line to balance. But I think the bottom line is that there has to be some self-interrogation there.
Yeah.
For the writer.
Mm-hmm. Well, as Bronwyn, Rhiannon Drew says here, it is your trauma and also the rest of ours. I mean, it's something that we all participate in, being in this culture. And that we've been at war my entire life. It never ends. And even now, right. I think I saw there's some meme going around that this is like the first Christmas or something that we haven't been at war because we finally left Afghanistan. But that's just all, semantics or something, because we're all over the, military bases everywhere and drone strikes everywhere. It doesn't really matter whether or not we're sort of officially someplace. We're all participating and paying for this and not, protesting out in the streets every day, and benefiting from it too. So we're all, we're benefiting economically. It's just the fact of reality. And I don't know. So it's such a big, complicated topic, and I'm so glad you try to tackle it here. And this is actually the cover too, I should mention, is Adam himself. This is a photograph you took, plus a painting by Nancy Mitchell. So we sort of collaged them together. But this is actually Adam. Put it on screen. Yeah, this is actually Adam here. Has he? Did he read the poems as you were writing them, sort of gradually, or did he sort of see the book for the first time as one thing when it came out?
So he saw many of the poems that were published. I'm getting ready to ship off a whole pile of books for him and his family. So I'm not sure, he hasn't seen the full collection yet, but he is certainly familiar with most of the poems in there. So I'm excited for him to have it, and for his family to have it as well.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
Sure. Maybe in retrospect, he could have come home. So this maybe is a little bit more of a window into the classroom and what it was like. And actually talk about like what's true. It is true in here that he did envision hell this way. So in retrospect, he could have come home in a flag draped coffin, could have been comatose or burned beyond recognition. Sure, they'd do a good job reconstructing him, but even the best job could only approximate who he'd been before, but would never be again, although traces of the old Adam would still be there, like a palimpsest, almost, but not entirely erased. In retrospect, he'd been lucky. He came back in one piece, mostly, except for his foot, which refuses to stay and refuses to go, clinging to him like a film of dust. He still looks like himself, only thinner. In time, he'll be able to have the dark chocolate, the driving leg, the yellow hatchback. But now he's dreaming himself out of time. Who knows where he's gone? Back to 29 Palms or his Mat V, or maybe back to English class. After we read No Exit, I asked my students to imagine their own hell. And in Adam's version, the clock in his head is always ticking. No one can see or hear him.
Yeah, and that was recommendations from the chapbook. And I'm thinking, since the chapbook is so concise on topic, maybe we should read a few poems in a row. Do you want to read like maybe two more, and then we'll talk more about, because I want to ask you about like your life and poetry and stuff, but it's sort of strange to jump back and forth between this topic. So let's do two more poems.
Sure. What about the last two?
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah.
Kind of picking up from where he was at Walter Reed, and then finishing up with the title poem. Adam drives his Focus, a yellow-orange turbocharged hatchback with black leather bucket seats, 19-inch rims, and a stick shift. Tangerines scream, a color I'd call ugly if he hadn't said he liked it because you can't miss him. The Wounded Warrior cars, some red Mustangs and Camaros, matte black pickups with tinted windows, are kept in America Garage, where my student unscrews from his left stump his walking leg, sets it by the front wheel, then screws on his driving leg. Creeping along the perimeter since he's not ready to go off base, we cruise past a legless vet in the sun, strapped like so much luggage to a stretcher, past amputee patrolmen on Segways, past grazing fawns.
That was Adam Drives His Focus. And then we'll read the title poem too. But before you do, can you explain a little bit about Acheron? I've mentioned on this podcast and other things many times that I'm terrible with mythology. I cannot keep anything straight. I looked up when we got the chapbook, which I always do. I always like Wikipedia stuff when it's like references to mythology, and I still, even though I read about it, I probably 5 times I've looked up Acheron. I can't even remember. So tell us what Acheron is and how that relates to the book.
Okay, I had to had to make sure and listen to some pronunciations because I actually have a hard time pronouncing where the epic that the title is taken from, but it's from Nonnos's Dionysiaca, which is a 5th century epic by Nonnos about the god Dionysus, sort of recounting all of his adventures. And so the title poem, the title of the book is actually taken from that. I will pass even to Acheron, the river of pain of my own free will, and with rapture even. So the book is titled I will pass even to Acheron, you get to the end to get the rest of that sentence. So that's where it's from, that epic tale of Dionysus. So I will pass even to Acheron, the river of pain of my own free will, and with rapture even. He's signing papers next week. Next week in Coronado, another student, gamer kid who hated school, smoked black and milds, fought town kids with glass bottles. He could already be a Marine. He's got biceps now, a crew cut. Says he's going to let loose. He's going to kill. He's going to go to the worst place on earth. He's going to fuck some shit up. But first he's going to run 10 miles, put his fins on, swim from Sandy Point to the moored barge. He'll dive deeper and deeper into the dark murk until he finds it, the anchor. And when he does, he'll tie a red ribbon around its stem.
And that was the title poem. I will pass even to Acheron, the river of pain of my own free will, and with rapture even. It's just such a tight book around a theme, so skillfully done and so condensed. I mean, a few people mentioned it's the shortest chapbook we've done, I think.
Is it? Oh, wow.
It is, yeah. I mean, they're all about the same length, but it's a few pages shorter than it's 32, and it's a quick read and an intense, powerful read. Can you talk a little bit about how the chapbook came together? Like how you mentioned already that you'd submitted it to many contests and it took some time organizing it as a manuscript. How much, what kind of changes? Is there any advice you can give to people? We have the Rattle Chapbook Prize coming up again. The deadline is just, 13 days away. And so people are sort of polishing up their manuscripts right now. So can you explain a little bit about how you sort of decided to condense this book into the shape that it became? Because it's sort of like it's like a diamond of a book, really. It is.
Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't easy, and actually, it began as a full length collection. I had other poems in there related that ended up becoming my next actual full length manuscript, Postmortem Say. So I realized in thinking about it, and submitting to the contest and getting so much positive feedback that I thought, because it's such a, I guess I was having trouble tying in the Adam thread with the other poems, which were sort of all loosely connected by this general broader theme of violence. But I realized as I kept writing towards and more poems in my other manuscript that I guess I began to see that I really that the Adam poems needed to be pulled out, and I also had to set it aside for a while and just kind of let it, for some time, for some months, and just let it kind of sit as I processed. But I think just realizing that no, this is it's there, it is its own universe, and that's, I think, what was the breakthrough for me. I'm someone who, even in my writing, I have no problem changing things and changing things radically. So many of these poems existed in initial drafts in much, much different forms. So I don't really consider myself a fast writer either. So it does take me some time, but I guess I would say not be afraid of radical revision, because the beauty of computers, right, is that we can keep everything and we have a record, so you can always go back. But definitely as I wrote more, it became clearer to me that no, they were really kind of separating themselves out from my other manuscript. And that's when that breakthrough happened.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the form? So Dick Westheimer here asks if you could talk about the form of the last poem, which moves around the page. Everybody saw it on screen. It's right here. But other poems too in the book. It's a book that takes many different shapes as you move through the poems in an interesting way, because they feel. It doesn't feel like it doesn't fit. It feels since the theme connects together so well. Maybe the fact that it's moving through different lengths of poems and different shapes of poems. Feels very, it's something you almost like half notice or something. So how did the form of this poem come to be? And can you talk about like why you chose it?
Sure. I would say generally that what you're also noticing with some of the poems is probably my inclination to try different line lengths. I think when I sit down to write, I don't necessarily have, there's a difference, I think, between being able to write an initial draft of a poem in short, maybe tight couplets, but then the final draft might be something completely different. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a difference between actually getting something, what it takes to get something on the page, but that's where like actually a lot of the sort of more radical revisions would occur, was in the shape of the poems themselves, the longer lines, just trying to find my lines. And so with this particular poem, I was thinking a lot about water. I live in the Annapolis area and have been on the Eastern Shore for most of my adult life. So surrounded by the Chesapeake Bay, and so that I think, and so tying back to the idea of the river of pain, and I think so. So this poem was more intuitive, I think, to me, and felt like I guess the student that I'm speaking of, and that the speaker is speaking of in this poem is also, I think, groping too and kind of looking for something. So, and maybe not able to find it, So I think that's kind of what I was thinking subconsciously, probably.
Yeah, and a lot of the poems are very short in the book. There's that one very tiny poem, the third grader's note to Adam posted on the wall of room 438, Walter Reed, which it was that. I'm wondering if the shorter poems, because you mentioned radical revision, were these much longer? I mean, was a poem like that, or a poem like Stoic, for example, were those poems, sort of longer and did a whole lot more, and then you cut them back in this very small form, or were they sort of always that small?
Stoic actually was sort of in the form that that was one of the rare occasions where it was generally in the form that you see it. The third grader's note to Adam that's posted on the wall of room 438 East, Walter Reed, is just simply a found poem. Mm-hmm. And I always really loved that, the sort of the irony there, right? Dear Adam, I'm sorry you ran over a mine, they're well hidden. And the third grader forgets forgets that D is elided in the note. It's a third grader, but it was just so, I'm just really glad that I was able to incorporate that in here. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit more about your, the way you came to poetry. How long have you been a poet? Like, do you remember the first time you sort of thought of yourself as a poet, or the first poem you wrote? How did you come to be an author?
So I can actually that would be thanks to my 11th grade English teacher, mm-hmm. Kathy Gaynor. And when we had to, we were doing a poetry unit, and we had to choose a poet, write a paper, blah blah blah. And a poet that I just immediately fell in love with was Anne Sexton. So she was really just an immediate touch point for me, and still is. So that's really the first time. Oh my gosh, I can remember listening to a cassette tape. Anybody remember those of her reading Ringing the Bells? And I just it was such a fabulous. I get chills as I think of it, because it was just such a haunting reading. So that's really, I think, when I first fell in love with poetry and started writing it. I don't think I really self-identified as a poet until actually quite a bit after college. I took creative writing. I was a journalist there. I thought of myself primarily as nonfiction, a fiction writer, but it wasn't until my ex-husband and I lost our first child halfway through my pregnancy, my first pregnancy, that I started writing, and what I was writing, and I was working full-time still, kind of came out. I think it lent itself to poetry a little bit more, so I think some of that personal trauma definitely it sort of enacted something in me. And I just started writing and started taking craft lessons, actually, from my first poetry teacher is Sue Ellen Thompson, and who's a fabulous poet, and she lived near me, and I actually connected with her through the high school that I was where I was teaching. So she's like, "Oh, well, maybe you should apply to Bread Loaf." I'm like, "Bread Loaf? What's that?" Right?
Yeah.
So but that's really, so it wasn't until I came back to poetry, I think later in my life, and just really fell in love with it. And I'm like, wow, this is who I am.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's sort of more recently then. Did you notice any, since you can sort of look back at what you were writing when you picked up poetry again versus now, do you see like a progression over the last however many years it's been since you sort of picked it up seriously?
Yeah, I think I have. I think I'm a smarter reader of poetry, and part of that is just comes, I think, with this, like, as you apprentice any craft, you acquire more knowledge, and I do think that writing is something that you do have to kind of apprentice, like a craft. I know that MFA school isn't necessarily for everyone, but for me, I love being in the classroom. I love that environment. It really it was really where I needed to be. I think I've probably learned that. It is still true that probably my main tendency in writing and it is to tend more toward the narrative strain. So, I think I'm maybe more conscious about that now than maybe I was in the beginning. And, so in the revision process, with feedback from my peers, I think a lot about, okay, where and how am I telling? Am I telling too much? Where do I dial it back? Do I want to, where's the lyric coming in here? Where's the meditative? So, but that comes so much later,
Mm-hmm. Well, your next, your forthcoming book, which it's going to be a wait still. It's still a whole year plus away, is Postmortem Say. Postmortem Say is the title, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And can you explain a little bit about that, about what the subject matter is and how it differs? You mentioned a little about that the topic is violence a little bit, but that it wasn't related as much to the Adam story, that you wanted to pull it out as a separate chapbook. So how is what are the themes about the forthcoming book, the full length?
So I was thinking a lot about this before the call, and since you and I had talked yesterday to run through the sound test and all of that, make sure we had our tech in gear. I realized that I think for a while I've been perhaps not wanting to claim it or say what the manuscript is really about, and so I'm going to do that now, and I'm just going to say that I think that it is the story of a marriage that is falling apart, that is that's broken, and the different kinds of violences that we inflict on each other, on ourselves, and also that come from some unexpected places.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Do you want to read a poem to sort of start that a little bit? I think we have the title poem here, right?
Yeah. Let me turn to it. Postmortem Say. Could say crimsoned limbs and blood moon glass shatter. Say was chrome smoke. Say the night diamond flecked. Say the cause was exsanguination due to blunt force trauma from a wreck. Say too many contributing factors to list. Or say the truth, which is to say, it was dark, we never saw each other. Say by the time we did, it was already too late. Say the loss total.
Yeah, that was Postmortem Say, the title poem from Amanda's forthcoming manuscript. I don't know. I read really quickly because I just got the manuscript yesterday. But last night I read through, and it's a similar feel in the way that it's so tight and so atmospheric. It feels just so polished, like both of these two manuscripts do. Yeah. I don't know. Can you talk about the way a poem comes to be? Like a poem like Postmortem Say, which is such an interesting title, which became the title of the whole the whole manuscript. It's very strange and memorable, just the way you put that. So how did that come to be, and how does a poem come to be?
How did the particular poem Postmortem Say?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, for this, I think for this particular poem, this is an example of where I had another poem, and it was actually, it was in its earlier iterations, it was kind of spread out on the page. And in the same way that I Will Pass Even to Acheron, the last poem was that we were just talking about. And so here, I think that there were some of the language and imagery and the sounds in here, maybe get to your point about being kind of atmospheric. And so I think that there's the repetition for me, the lexical repetition is kind of what I think holds this particular poem together, and is probably really what it needs. I think it's a little, there's kind of maybe I hope an enchanting or chanting quality about it. And so I think that it definitely captures some of the various moods that we see throughout the manuscript.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great way to start the book. How long ago did you finish? It's a few years out where it's going to be published. How long ago did you finish the manuscript?
So about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And although you already know that with my tendency to revise, I had opened it up for the first time in a while last night, which was really interesting because I read the poems, or I read them so differently now. And in part, that's just because of some events that have happened over the course of the last 5 months, which I know you're aware about. But my ex-husband, who was a prosecutor and a circuit court judge on the Eastern Shore, committed suicide in September as the FBI went to arrest him for basically sexual exploitation of a minor child. And this was a complete surprise to all of us, his entire family, everyone. And so, when I go back and look at these poems now, they're kind of eerily prescient in some ways. Mm-hmm. And I guess I sort of lost track of your I lost track of your question, but they're definitely there's I think throughout the manuscript you see some of these sort of external threats of violence by virtue of his job as a prosecutor and a judge. We did have threats of violence against the family, and so it's kind of looking back on some of this and thinking, wow, I never really thought about the threat being kind of internal in the way that it was.
Yeah. So just so everyone understands, you were divorced about a year or year and a half ago or so. Is that, or 2 years ago? Or?
It would have been, we weren't even divorced a year. It was October of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we were co-parenting and, did maintain, a positive relationship.
Yeah.
Throughout.
And so this all happened over the summer. So we, as we were putting the chapbook together,
yes.
I Will Pass Even to Acheron. Honestly, I'm sort of surprised that you made it, given all that was going on, that we still, and you mentioned that it was a good distraction. And I kept saying, thinking to myself, I hope it is a good distraction, because it's such, I can't imagine what you've been going through for the last 6 months, out of nowhere. In the middle of, the pandemic, which is something that we're all dealing with, then all of a sudden you're hit with this sledgehammer of what happened that you had no idea was going on. You'd already been divorced, and I don't know. It's just, how did you sort of have you gotten through the last 6 months?
I think that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. It's other than first and foremost, I think of our boys and making sure that they're, that they're protected, that I'm protected, and safe. We did move back in with my parents, and so it's been helpful to have family around. And I think everyone's been really, from Jonathan's side of the family, our side of the family, everyone has pulled together and is on the same page in terms of, they're not, we're all victims here. Right. Mm-hmm. And I do think about the victims a lot. It's just really complicated. There's definitely a lot to work through and sort through. I have been writing some, but really it's just a matter of, it's like, what other choice do you have? There is no other choice. Mm-hmm. There is no other choice than to move on. So,
yeah. The whole aspect of how much trauma plays into poetry, in a way, in the interview that just happened to be with this issue with James Pennebaker that just came out, talking about how important poetry is for healing trauma, because the thing that he discovered through his research is that it was the traumas that we don't share that cause the most psychic damage over time, and health damage too. And so, in a way, just by sort of that knowledge of our own mortality, even, humans are the only creatures in the known universe that experience trauma in this psychological way, and that and in a way that we're all traumatized by something. Life is traumatic for human beings. We're naked. The whole Eden myths are all about how we're naked, and we need protection from reality. And so I don't know, do you think, can you talk a little bit about that act of healing through writing? Do you feel that it brings things together and helps heal through these difficult times?
Well, one of my mentors, the poet Alan Shapiro, likes to say, certainly writing doesn't actually solve the problem. It's true that it doesn't solve the problem, but I do believe that there is a transformative quality about it, and processing it however you do on the page, through art, through music, creatively. I do think that it is a transformative process, and I do think that I do think that helps. I do think that helps. Mm-hmm. Also, having a really good therapist helps.
Yeah, some people have told you that poetry is not therapy, and it's not, and then in the same time it kind of is in a way. Mm-hmm. They're different things, and let's hear another poem from the manuscript.
Sure. I think I'll read Portent, and this will be, I think, coming out in Cimarron Review shortly. And a little bit of an insight into what it could be like, I think, living in the sort of what I would call hyper masculine environment on the Eastern Shore with guns and hunting and then law enforcement. Important. He'd gone again, dressed in camo and a bulletproof vest, cig at his hip, gone despite her constant nagging, the why go if you don't have to, and what if something happens, please. But where else the exhilaration? With their boys, 3 and 1, who never slept? With his depressed, distant wife, who left piles of laundry, never cooked, cleaned, or gardened, who cut her eyes at him, his heavy foot, the shaking floor. Still, he always came home, no different tonight, but for the sudden summer squall. His pickups struck by lightning as he pulled into the drive, nearly burned alive while she lay safe inside, and later swore she had never heard him, his fists on the door.
And that was a portent. It is an interesting poem too. I mean, this book the whole book is sort of a portent of all that would eventually happen. It's really strange almost to read it, knowing that it was written before all of this happened. And then, in reading it through that lens. How do you, I don't know, the one fascinating thing about poetry that I've always found is that it's sort of this access into the subconscious that we don't really have access to, because we know a lot of the stuff that's going on, but we don't have a way of acknowledging it or something like that. And so a poem like Portent, did you feel like poetry is a portent, that it brings out things that we don't know we know? Or can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, when you say that, the first thing that I think of is like, duende, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also that kind of the more Dionysian or chaotic that is, I think within us, and kind of balanced out by what Ellen Bryant Voigt would call the I can never say this, the Apollonian, with Apollo, right? So it's sort of like the measure and balance and counterbalanced with that sort of Dionysian undercurrent. So I think, kind of looking over some of these poems, after having not for a while, and in light of what's happened, I think, wow, they really, they knew something that I didn't, right? And I think it's kind of too simple to say that, or it would be easy to say, wow, you think you know someone, but you don't really know. And to an extent that's true. And I think that's, I think that's where you begin to see the impact of trauma, and sort of that's the profoundly sad and disappointing part of it for me, is to see how that played out through history and kind of came full circle, with Jonathan, who was wrestling with his own traumas that he never shared. And so I think it's been a real, and again, I'm not sure if this is really answering your question, but I think it's been, because like I feel like I have so many questions and I have no answers, but it's been more of an exercise in negative capability, right? Mm-hmm. To say, okay, he is, or we are all, we're all, none of us is just one thing, right? We are this, and we are this too. And so that's kind of how, that's the best way that I've been able to kind of reconcile this particular trauma so
mm-hmm.
far.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem.
Sure. Have any preference? I'm debating between a couple.
I don't know, whichever you want to read.
Okay. So this is more about actually a poem about my son, and mixed feelings that I think I have as a mother, and being kind of surrounded again in that the gun culture of the shore. The day after the latest mass shooting, he's ready to blow up his calc book at the firing range, my student. I almost laugh. I need to go shoot something. I need to go shoot something. It's funny, right? Hundreds of pages of equations paddle fluttering through the powder-singed air. Perhaps this is what happens after 20 years of living on the shore. You become accustomed. Shotguns, puffy camo, straight pipe trucks, Confederate-themed everything, crab stickers, license plates, tattered flags on the front lawns of foreclosed homes. When our son was born, my husband dressed him in a camo onesie. I was still on the table, bleeding where they cut and stapled me. What was it the therapist said to my son about processing anger? Punch a pillow. Take a walk. Always let your parents know where you're going. My son, who would never, who clung to my leg as a toddler, who wrote a poem at 10 called The Front Yard Cardinal. Now he prefers shooting blackbirds and keeps his bedroom door closed while he's killing virtual enemies. My son, who says he wants an AR-15 when he turns 18. Who knows whether he's joking?
And that was the day after the last mass shooting from Amanda's forthcoming book. And it was a surprise to me to think of Maryland as an area that's like that. Where the gun culture is large. And I live in a similar area too. I'm not too far from Los Angeles, but we are very, there's military base right next to us down the hill. And there is that sort of, I remember when we were looking at houses here, probably 2 out of 3 had a gun case like in the, somewhere in the house. And so think of how many guns are in this town. There's probably more guns than people where I am right now, for sure. And I don't know. I mean, in a way it ties into I Will Pass Even to Acheron, because it seems to me that the reason why we have gun culture is so people will join the army. It feels like that is just the setup for it. We have right now is kickoff for 12 NFL football games, and for a lot of them they'll have the Army color guard coming out and a flyover showing how great the military is as a recruiting tool, which the military pays big dollars for. And we have all the first-person shooter games, which is a platform developed by the military, and now all the games are like this first-person shooter side, which is a platform that was designed to train soldiers, and then we put it out, so the whole thing is designed. There's this war culture underneath the surface of everything we do. And and that comes out in a lot of these poems too. But can you talk a little bit about that, about how, guns, even it seems like guns come into your life where you don't want them to and you can't help it.
Yes, that's so true. And actually I did end up going and getting my gun permit. Because for a number of reasons, and this was after I was, and I think you actually published a poem on one of the daily rattles that was inspired by actually being stuck at the Annapolis Mall while the mass shooting of the Capital Gazette paper was literally across the street, and people were being evacuated to the mall. And sort of what struck me at the time is that, even with Twitter and, your phone and instant, just the ability to get instant, air quotes, news, it was really hard to get information about what was going on outside. And not every store in the mall actually handled it the same way. So there were people that were still, with the shooter, and they didn't know if there were more involved. There were bomb threats in Baltimore at the same time, so nobody knew what was going on. But there was no unified response, and so I was stuck in a retail store on lockdown for a couple of hours, and thinking, "Wow, is this really how it ends in like the dressing room?" And what am I going to do? Just like, where's the exit? And gee, okay, let's try on some clothes until it's like okay to go out. But I think that, between living on the Eastern Shore and, my ex-husband and our older son love hunting, they ate what they kill. my husband's job as a prosecutor, and he would carry a gun. It was definitely, I felt so saturated by it, right? And so really hard, I think, for me, especially in as a female in a house full of in this environment of men, it was part of this. My struggle was to find my voice, and I'm not sure where I was actually going with that, other than to say that after the mall shooting, I think that I realized that I became, and I think this is part of the writer in me, the curious piece. I wanted to go make sure that I knew how to use a handgun, that it wasn't something that I was afraid of. I needed to kind of investigate it. So there are some poems that I've kind of written that are born of that particular experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and where we live too. I mean, they're one of the reasons why we have so many guns is because the police. It'll take them half an hour to get here. Maybe we have no police anywhere near us. There's one police car leaves town at 8 p.m. and there's
right.
There's no one else. And so I don't know. There's a way that you do have to. I also think about too with the pandemic and other things that could happen. Society could collapse at some point too. And so there's a reason why. They're important tools at the same time as we have this whole culture built up around them. It's just a strange world to be living in. Another thing that you talked about when we were talking on the phone a few times was given the situation that happened, the role that like social media plays in all of this. I mean, the Jonathan's suicide was sort of all over social media before like family even knew about it, and I just keep coming back to that thoughts because in our town this week too, somebody who I knew was killed by her husband, and it's the first sort of act of that kind of violence in 10 years in this town, but at the same kind of thing, like everybody sort of was sharing things on social media before anybody knew what was happening. And it ties into to the whole thing about like you don't really know people. Like I knew these people. They seemed like such a loving, happy couple. It's so hard to imagine like what happened that night, and it's sort of none of my business at the same time. And there's such a strange thing that goes on. Like we have too much information. Like we shouldn't know things that we can know so rapidly without knowing the whole story or what happened. So I don't know. What was your experience like? Because we talked about that before, through the media and all the attention that Jonathan's case has brought upon you.
In a lot of ways, that's been, and first of all, I should say that I understand why, I understand that, he was a public figure and it's a story. It was an important story, and it's in a story that it is a story that needed to be told and needed to be reported upon. I completely and fully respect that. What I think but the social media aspect of it has definitely been the most difficult. So our former neighbor, for example, whose son I taught, was posting about it, as it happened. And so that morning was just a difficult one, because you realize that, there's no time to talk to the therapist. How do you tell the kids? It's just like, it's a race to simply tell them first, right? So I think in a situation where you have zero control anyway, and that's the only modicum of control that you have, that was something that was deeply hurtful. These are people that I knew for, and were neighbors with for a long time. And so I think, and I'm not on social media because of all this, just for privacy concerns. And, there were, and there's just been some really just completely baseless kind of conspiracy type things that I've seen out there. And so it's had me thinking a lot about the ways in which we consume news, how we, that's the very nature of capitalism, right? Is that we are consumers. And so I think that, and I think we had used the word yesterday when we were talking about the sort of fragmentation that happens I think in large part as a result of social media. And I'm sort of more also aware of and sensitive to the personas that I think we construct on social media platforms and in our public lives, right? And how is that versus who we are privately. So that's really been, and again, I really don't have any answers except, my inclination is to protect myself. So when people say, oh, you should go, the police should go talk to his wife to find out what she knows. My first instinct and foremost instinct is to protect myself. I need to be off of these platforms because it's not, it is not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know what to do because social media is such a powerful tool for sharing and communicating. But then it is something that, like, I used to be a lot more active on social media. And now I just am with, like, friends in certain more closed environments because, even the poetry world is just full of insanity, to put it. I mean, like Don Scher was sort of hounded off Twitter. I mean, he had the greatest Twitter account for the longest time, and then he closed it up after, being attacked constantly. And there's like conspiracy theories even about Rattle that like there's people saying that we have, I don't even remember, like some kind of like human trafficking thing that it's a cover for, and people are like sharing this stuff. I mean, and then the thing about social media that always strikes me is that the people, you assume that everybody on social media is sort of normal, I mean, they're this whole contingent of the population that's just unhinged, and they used to write letters to the editor and the news station, and you'd sort of laugh at the letters to the editor because they're crazy, and now they're on social media, and there's this weird way that we assume that it's like a normal person that we're talking to, and a lot of times it's not. I mean, going back to the trauma, but we're all traumatized, and we're all coming at the world in this weird, fragmented, filtered way, and I don't know. I mean, social media just seems so dangerous at the same time as it's so valuable. It's so strange because I mean, you can learn more about the world through social media than the news, but then there's this dark side to it that's just brutal. So I think you talked about your book that's coming, you're working on now, or the poems are sort of dealing with this a little bit too, right?
Yeah. So and the last couple of months, I've been participating in the grind, right? So it's forcing me to, which is a national program that was started by Ross White, and so we get paired with people every month if you can sign up for it, and that's been really helpful to kind of force me to put something down on the page, even though it may be a sentence, it may be an image, it's just something, and that has been tremendously helpful. So
yeah, well, we kind of have been going off on talking tangents. Let's do some more poems. I think we're sort of running up on time, but let's do, if you have time, if you don't mind, a poem and then a little talk and then another poem to close it out.
Okay.
So let's do two more poems.
So I'll read because I think that so much of what we've been talking about is this idea of story, right? And the stories that we tell ourselves and stories that we believe or what we think are true. And so again, this is in the manuscript. It's called All Kinds of Stories. My body will not lie. Every time within a week, back at the urgent care, peeing into a cup. Again, my son's friend's mother is working her shift again like she was the time before and the time before that. Stress, she says, will do it every time. And again, I do not disagree. Again, I shift the conversation to our boys. But then again, I have to admit, I did not know my son had spent the night at his house 2 days ago. I had not been at home where I slept alone, my husband on the couch, his snoring and a bad foot. At least that's what we tell ourselves. If there's one thing I've learned, you can tell yourself anything. You can make up all kinds of stories.
And there's All Kinds of Stories, again from the forthcoming book by Amanda Newell. So So it is true. Like poets are the keepers of stories in a way, and I don't know how much of kind of to bring it back to the current, the original topic. We're talking about Adam and I will pass even to Acheron. What is your sense of like the like the difference between what's true factually and what's true on a deeper level? Like how tied to specific accuracy are you, do you think, or do you think a poet should be? Do you feel like it's okay to change facts in the service of the deeper truth of the poem, or do you think that the
Absolutely.
story, yeah.
Absolutely. So while there are many things that are, maybe factually true, how they get kind of worked into and transformed in the process, I feel is like it's always in service of the poem, right? It's always first and foremost in service of the poem. And I think that's how I approach it. So I don't feel particularly tied to, oh my gosh, everything has got to be exactly like it was at all. If there are important details or images, they will work themselves into the poem, but it's whether something actually happened or not. I think it's, and I should say it's in the service of the poem, but but beyond that, it's more in service of the emotional truth, right? I think for me, that's what's important. Finding out something I didn't know.
Yeah, for me, I feel like the distinction, I don't believe in facts. I think that's kind of what it comes down to, maybe. I think facts only exist within context. And when we talk about,
So true.
A fact can be something that's factually true, but without the context surrounding it, it doesn't matter, I mean, it's like a gun without bullets or something. I mean, it is what it is, but it can't do anything. And then truth is or facts outside of context that in every context remain true, I think is what a truth is. And I think that's what poets tend to seek, is the truth that's like bigger than facts, that exists longer across time and space and perspective than just than facts do. So it's really cool to hear you see that, because a lot of people disagree. Like a lot of people think that if there's a fact wrong in a poem, that ruins the poem, and I don't care about that. So it's interesting to hear you say that. But we are kind of running past the time. So do you want to finish out with one last poem?
Sure. Maybe I'll end with a poem called Foreclosure, and it is the closing poem in Postmortem Say, and again, sort of prescient, because I think that our old house is likely to go into foreclosure. Foreclosure. Missing shingles like lost teeth, sun-baked shutters. Always last on the block to mow after rain, and even then, only in front. The rest of the yard, like us, we let go. Yellow jackets, angry swarm, burning bushes. The dumpster's full.
Yeah, and that was Foreclosure. A great poem to end on. And thanks so much for being a guest, Amanda. It's been really fun talking to you, and really interesting discussion. And also, these are just such wonderfully written books. The two of them. I mean, I'm sorry that everybody has to wait over a year for this poem, or for this next book to come out, but it's worth the wait. So everybody should pin it, put it on your calendar or something. Then sometime in 2023, you should buy this book. Do you think about revising it all given what's happened, or are you sort of more moving forward, like this is a space, because that time gap is so weird, to have to write a book and then you wait so long in publishing. Do you think about changing anything up for that, or is it just done and then you're moving on?
I think I'm not sure that it would be. My instinct is to say I don't think it would be as honest if I did change anything about it or add poems. I think it's got to be another book, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought I was dealing with, as you say, I was dealing with one set of facts, right? They were facts that were my own truth. And, it turns out that wasn't the only truth that there was. And so that's part of, I think, the reckoning and that I have to deal with. But I think that it's already sort of its own artifact. So I think I need to respect that and respect the poems that only could have been written from that particular point of view, right?
Yeah. It's almost like respecting the past self or something. And it's cool to hear you say that too.
Right.
But it's just a wonderful book, and I can't wait for everybody to get to see the actual copy when it comes out next year. But thanks for being a guest, Amanda. It's been great talking to you, and thanks for this chapbook too, which all the readers have loved, and I loved helping put together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. This has been such an honor and so much fun talking to you today. Thank you for all of your support and everything that you do.
Yeah, it's definitely my pleasure. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Yes, that was Amanda Newell. And of course, she was the 2021 Rattle Chapbook Prize winner, one of the three, for her, for I Will Pass Even to Acheron. This is the chapbook here. There's no cover for the next book, but Postmortem Say is the book that's forthcoming. And once again, that book is forthcoming from Červená Barva Press. But you can find more about Amanda Newell at her website, amandanewellpoet.com. That's Amanda. Newell is Newell, poet.com, amandanewellpoet.com. So find more information, more poems there. And of course, find I Will Pass Even to Acheron at rattle.com on our website. Now we're going to take a quick break. We're going to go to the open lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem about a moment of 2021 you'll never forget. So if you have any poems about that, feel free to share. I'll put up the open mic screen here. First, what you do if you'd like to participate in the open mic, they don't have to be prompt poems. They can be news poems about current events. They can be poems you've recently published and are proud of and want to share. Whatever you want to share is great, but the prompt is a prompt too, and you can share those as well. No matter what you're doing, email the poem first to openmic@rattle.com. That's openmic@rattle.com, so I can show it on the screen as you read, which is always nice to read along the poems. And then pick one or the other. If you'd like to appear on video, go to Skype, open your Skype app, and type Rattle Poetry into the search. Then send me a chat message. Just say, hey, I want to read a poem. I will call you within the next hour or so. If you'd like to do phone, the number is 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. There, just call, let it ring a few times, and hang up. If you call right now, I'll know that you wanted to share a poem, and I'll call you back. So I'm going to go to a quick break and a stretch and get things set up, and I will be right back. And we're back. Thanks for letting me stand up and stretch. It's just it's a 2.5 hour show or so. It's a long time to sit in one place. So thanks for obliging me that way. Now, the open lines are starting now. And as I mentioned, the prompt this week was to write a poem about a moment of 2021 you'll never forget. And now this month, so this is the time of New Year's resolutions. And I was thinking about it. My New Year's resolution is going to be that I no longer will write 20-minute poems right before the show. And so as I was starting to write a 20-minute poem right before the show, I thought, no, I'm going to take poems seriously. That's my New Year's resolution, is take writing a poem every week very seriously and only share it if it's a serious, a real poem that I actually spent time on. I was thinking about that David Kirby interview where he says a poet equals, what was it, idea plus time or something like that, or something plus time, but the time is something I don't give it, and I'm going to start giving it to now. So I started writing something, and I was like, no, this is not a real poem, to be honest. I mean, it's not a poem unless you enter the poetic space. So I'm only going to share things where I actually enter the poetic space. And so I don't have a poem. And Megan has also been sick this weekend, unfortunately. So she didn't get to write a poem either. As you know, normally she does. She's really good about that, but has been a little under the weather. So we're just going to go straight to open lines. And let's call up first. Let me say we have a... that's strange. So somebody... So somebody called in. It was a 919 number, I think. It's not appearing on my call screen though, which happened a little while ago too. So if you're at that 919 number, give me a call again, because for some reason it didn't appear. I think it was 919. I just saw it out of the corner of my eye. So maybe the system, maybe something changed on. The problem if you're doing the show over a long space of time, something like this, is the technology. Everybody updates things and things change constantly. So it's running through so many different programs. And maybe I don't know why, but that number, it showed up as calling and then didn't hold. So calling again. I wanted to go to some other callers first, just so you could see that how it goes. So if when I call you, the one thing you should remember, actually two things, is that I'm going to be a little bit of a delay. So I'm calling kind of from the future. So you have to have the poem in front of you. First of all, you have to read. You can't read off the screen as I show the poem, even if you sent it. You have to actually have the poem in front of you. You also have to shut off your stream or mute yourself before you start reading or talking to me, because otherwise you're talking to two me's at the same time from two different times, and that doesn't make any sense. It's confusing. So who do we have? We have Bev Wendell Atherstone. We have Zachary Honeycutt. We have Carolyn Codd, Mike Bales, Dick Westheimer, Nivedita Karthik, Angela Gartner. Let's go to Zachary Honeycutt first. And then, and I hope that 919 number, 912 it might have been, something like that, calls in again. Let's go to Zachary Honeycutt first. Hey, Zachary, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Cool, you called me first. Awesome.
Yeah, I try, since we have sort of a regular crowd, I try to mix up the time that I call you. So you get early on sometimes and later on sometimes. So what do you have that you want to share? Oh, yeah, that's right. You had the Warp 10 Lit magazine poem that you mentioned you'd like to share, and that had just come out. So, and once again, this Warp 10 is a science fiction poetry online journal, right?
Yeah, they're totally online, and I really love submitting to it because he usually gets back to me right away. Lane Chasik, he's really good with the timing, and I can get a lot of really cool stuff published on there where I use my imagination. I had a horror short story, like science fiction horror short story, published there a few months ago, the end of August, about UFOs. And now I just recently, on the 23rd, got 2 creepy science fiction poems published. And there's just a lot of great stuff on there. There's poems that range from like building lightsabers to alien conspiracy theories and just all kinds of really great stuff, UFO abductions and all those kinds of things. So it's just a really neat journal, and I enjoy writing for it.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's fun stuff that I enjoy. This is the picture that they included with your poems here. 2 poems from Zachary Honeycutt. Do you want to read both of these?
I think I'm going to start with Dead Cow, and I might read the other one too, yeah. But for now, let me start with Dead Cow.
Okay, so I've got Dead Cow up. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay.
All right, maybe you should say a little bit about what it's about, because I think, I'm a fan, as I mentioned many times, I'm a fan of the old Art Bell show, which I just found again. There's a podcast which probably is illegally, on the podcaster apps, playing old Art Bell shows from the 90s. So I've been re-listening to some of those. They're just so fun. I mean, I don't believe anything that's on there, but it's really fun radio, especially late night at work. And he's such a great host. Like, I'd love to be a host that's as good as him. So I'm familiar with like the Linda Moulton Howe is the woman who does the cow mutilation stories from, all that stuff. So explain a little bit though for people who don't know, because I'm not sure how much it's in pop culture, or maybe it is completely, but explain a little bit for people to know.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about myself, but I've just heard things, and I've watched videos about the cow mutilations, and yeah, it's happening all over. The story that my poem is about, Dead Cow, actually supposedly happened right in Ocala, Florida, which is like a little over an hour away from where I live. And this man and his wife just woke up the next day. The night before, they had seen strange lights in the sky, and they heard like these awful noises. They heard like their cows actually screaming, if you could imagine what a fearful cow sounds like when it's screaming. Mm-hmm. So they waited till the next morning, and they slowly walked out, and they found this dead cow on their property, and it had been completely gutted. And the way that it was gutted, it almost looked like someone had used like utensils and like specific tools to actually make an incision in the cow and take out the blood. There was no blood. And it's the creepiest thing. And yes, this kind of thing has been reported in a bunch of different states in the West and all over, like I said, even in Florida. And they don't know what's going on. There's all different theories. One theory is that there's some kind of substance in the cows that the aliens are using, I think, to even like get high, possibly. And they're getting high off of a product of the cow. And and there's no really logical explanation. And when I saw the footage for myself, you can't deny that, because I actually saw the footage myself, and they showed the cavity where everything was removed and there was no blood. And it's like, well, what's doing this? I mean, it can't be anything logical. So what's the next conclusion that you would draw?
Yeah. I remember in the 90s, the theory that was when mad cow disease was a big thing. And so the theory back then was that mad cow disease was going to ruin the entire planet, destroy all of the human race. And so the aliens were saving us from the mad cow disease by experimenting on the cows and figuring out what, how to fix what are those things called? The chlorions or whatever, what are those called? I can't remember. Anyway, let's hear this poem, Dead Cow, Zachary.
Yeah, sounds great. Dead Cow. I saw it driving down the road one day, tipped over at an angle, snout kissing the dirt, and cloven hooves sticking out in midair, pasted over the canvas in a way that seemed unnatural, frozen, separate from the chirping birds and shaking leaves of tree branches, like it was too stiff to be real, but someone had put it there anyway. It was so conspicuous that as I passed the thing, I could not stop my gaze from pivoting to it. And then, not even looking at the road, my eyes grew wide. There it was, scraped into the foreground, pushing back landscape and blocking skyline with its mouth full of cud, but cut open neatly and drained of all blood.
That is a creepy poem. Thanks for sharing that, Zachary. And then, do you want to do the other one's a sonnet, if you want to do it?
Yeah, I will. I will do that, yeah. I just want to say one more thing really quick, because I forgot to say that. Uh-huh. But this is like actually two things that happened to me that inspired me to write this poem. The other incident, at the beginning of this poem where the guy is passing the cow on the road, that actually happened to me. I forgot to tell you that. Oh, wow. I saw a dead cow once driving close to where I live on the side of the road. And just how I described it, that's exactly how it was. It was like so irregularly placed. It was like it was tipped over and its hooves were sticking out in midair. And I didn't go out of my car to see what was going on with it, but it looked very bizarre. It looked like it didn't belong there. It was just like stiff as a board and unnatural. And so that was the other thing that I wrote about. And so, yeah, it's kind of like in the shape of a UFO, the poem. I thought that like the words at the bottom could be like a beam coming out of the UFO, you know?
Yeah, well, that is cool. And let's see the other one. It's the Sonnet 17 Thunderbird. And what's this one about?
Okay, so yeah, this one is just kind of, you probably know all about this, Tim. It's based on like a Navajo legend, the Thunderbird. That's where I got the idea for the title. But I really wanted to just write a sonnet that kind of captured the whole mythos of that area and just all of the kind of strange things that you hear about going on in the desert. And there was a news story about they uncovered this like metal obelisk shaped thing in the desert, and they don't know how it got there. And it was there for like, I don't know, a few weeks, and then it disappeared. And no one knows where it came from, if it was the government or if the government took it away or if it was,
I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember
alien
that one.
origins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to.
So
I should look into that because
the subject of that is. Yeah.
Usually, Reddit or 4chan are really good at figuring out I wonder if they've figured that out, what those really were. I remember that those things. Those were interesting. Let's hear this poem because we want to keep going. So, Sonnet 17, Thunderbird. Go ahead.
All right. Thunderbird. Deep in the desert, superstition thrives, inscribed on totem poles in arid lands, and on men's lips who in their daily lives notice structures built not by human hands. Lizards with no eyes lie dead in their strives to taste false black water or hear the chants. Hard truths passed down behind cheap motel dives, swallowed by Navajo, lizards by ants. Something in the atmosphere of dark drives them to bring to life, before the fire's death, the object of derision. Among Clives, south of Moab, the subject of their breath. What left then took the metal obelisk? The Thunderbird? Maybe a flying disc.
That's a great sonnet. That was Sonnet 17, Thunderbirds. Thanks, Zachary, for joining and putting some speculation and some formalism into the podcast. Always fun.
Yeah, I had a blast too, Tim. I'll see you next week.
Yep, take care.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, so we have 2 first-time callers. I'll do those next. We have a 617 and a 607. I assume that's separate people. But first, let's do Nivedita Karthik, because it's Nivedita is in India, where it is like 1 a.m. or something. So let's call up Nivi and get her on. Hey,
Hello?
Nivedita, how are you doing today?
Hey, Tim, I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. It's a really fun morning. I really like the time. I don't know if it's frustrating for you being so late, but it's nice. It's nice for me to sort of get it right away.
This is also better for me rather than the morning when I'm like rushing to finish this and then rushing to head to work. This is so much better even for me.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I am. Okay, so what do you have that you'd like to share this week?
I have the usual prompt poem and the news story poem.
Okay, well, I have the prompt poem up. So go ahead with this. What was this? The Soul of Poetry.
Okay, so I think this year for me has been all about poetry. I think with Rattlecast, I think almost every week, touchwood, except for very few, that probably 2 or 3 that I've missed, I've almost attended everything. So I've been listening to more poetry, writing more poetry. Mm-hmm. So I think the entirety of 2021 for me is just been the year of poetry.
Oh, that is so cool.
COVID, all that is fine, but it's poetry. I think the cornerstone of 2021 for me is poetry. And I'm also working on a book of poetry that is this close to being published. Like it's almost published here in India. So I think 2021 for me is the year of poetry. So that's the best part about 2021 for me. So I think that's just what I wanted to bring forth here.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. I'm glad to hear it. So let's hear this poem, The Soul of Poetry. Go ahead.
The soul of poetry. A boundless, finite curve, blunting the keen edge of curiosity and blurring bridges. A dense canopy of emotions set down firmly upon the tree of perception, rooted in the ground of reality, with branches of imagination stretching outwards, whitewashing over the cracks between the lines, translating prosaic actions into unique thoughts.
Excellent description of poetry. Thanks for sharing that, Nivi. And then you have a news poem too.
And thank you, because I think Rattlecast is one of the main things that made 2021 the year of poetry for me.
Yeah.
So thanks to you and everybody.
That just makes me so happy. Thanks for saying that, Nivi. It's really I love doing this. It's my favorite thing to do. It's tempting to just go on forever on these shows because they're just so fun.
I know. I mean, same here. It's like I wait for Sunday night. Like I'm like, when is Sunday night? Like I know Monday is gonna come next morning, but you know what? That's fine. I just want Sunday night to be here so that I can attend Rattlecast. That's how it's become for me, and I just love it. And thank you so much.
Oh, it's just my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for being here. So then you have a fun poem like usual. Wait, what tops 2022 banished word list? So explain this article that we're talking about here.
So there's this college that comes up with a list of words that they deem not necessary or sort of bringing down the level of English. And each year they come up with a list of 10 words. And this year, some of them were so weird. Like new normal was one of the words on the list, which I think they're right in saying that new normal has been a tad bit overused in this time of COVID.
So. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's like very common phrases like, wait, what is something, at least people of my generation, like were like, wait, what did you just say? Things like that. It's like common lingo for us, and those were sort of like the banished words. And supply chain, I mean, that's just so random. Like supply chain, wait, you're on mute. Like I just don't know where they came up with these phrases. It was just so random. So I just had to like write about it.
Okay, cool. Well, let's hear this. This is banished. Go ahead.
Banished. Wait, what? What are you saying? Hold on. Circle back to the beginning, please, for I didn't quite catch that. You've suddenly gone into a deep dive without giving me the basis. Why am I interested? Oh, no reason. I'm just asking for a friend who's jumped on the literature bandwagon. In these times of the new normal, what was he doing earlier? Oh, he was into supply chain and logistics, you know. But that being said, at the end of the day, are we all not literature wannabes just hoping to improve our speak and write? Hello. So, did you just not hear a word I said? No, you were on mute.
Well, that is a true poet's reaction when they see a list of banished words to use every single one. So that's perfect. Thanks, Nivi.
And most of those are like words that I think most of us use at least one of those phrases on a daily basis. And it's like, why are those in the banished words list? But hey, it makes for a fun poem, so why not?
It does. Well, thanks as always, Nivi. It's always a lot of fun. Take care and have a good night.
Thank you, Tim. It's lovely talking to you too.
Yep, bye.
Have a great Sunday.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. This is Nivi DeKarthik with 2 poems. And now we have, we have 2, I don't know if they're first-time callers, so I don't see any unusual names on the email list. Yeah, we have Lisa, maybe Lisa Walker and Brennan Drew. So maybe there's one of these 2. We have a 617 and a 607. So let's call up 617 first and see who that might be. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle, and you are live on the air. Who am I talking to?
Hi, Tim. It's Peter Desmond.
Hey, Peter. It's great to. I've seen your name in the chat a lot lately. It's great to hear your voice.
I'm an enthusiastic new fan of your show.
Well, I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm so glad you could be here. Where are you calling from?
Cambridge, Mass.
Ah. And what do you have that you would like to share today?
It's called The Alchemist in the Bathroom.
Is there anything you want to say to set it up?
Oh, well, you asked for poems about the most striking thing that happened to us in 2021, and this counts.
Okay, well, let's hear it. Go ahead whenever you're ready. I put it up.
All right, I'm ready. The Alchemist in the Bathroom. I was safe at home, secure in my castle. A year-long lockdown? No hassle. Then the toilet balked. I flushed, the bowl brimmed, some liquid spilled over. Situation grim. The bowl slowly gurgled as its level abated. Could I get a plumber who'd been vaccinated? I chose the path of self-reliance, guided by facts and household science. Googling clogged toilet, I found Bob Villa. He had a potion to fell my Godzilla. Baking soda and vinegar. To the pantry I went and gathered the two ingredients. Pour Arm and Hammer into the bowl. Add non-balsamic vinegar. Let the good times roll. Wait half an hour and flush it away. Science will guide us to a better day.
And thanks for sharing that, Peter. That was The Alchemist in the Bathroom. And it unfortunately, it brings me back. I had we had a similar pandemic experience. We had to have last year, though, in the fall of 2020. Our whole septic system had to be replaced in the middle of the pandemic. So we had the porta potty outside for a month, and worrying about the plumbers and if they'd have masks and all that stuff. Yes, that brings me back to maybe the worst month of one of the worst months I can remember. But thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure. Bye.
Yeah, take care. That was Peter Desmond, and let's add Peter to our call list. We know who it is next time. 416 is calling in too. We'll get you after we do the 607. We also have Kimberly McNeil, who I haven't mentioned yet. Dick Westheimer and Angela Gartner are here too. So we got a full house, but let's where was that? Let me add Peter to my call list first, so we know who it is. And then let's go to the 607 and see who that is.
Hello.
Hey, this is Tim with Rattle, and you are live on the air. Who am I talking to?
This is Branwyn Drew in Rome, New York.
Hey, Branwyn. Yeah, so where'd you say, from Rome, New York?
Yes.
Ah, great. Yeah, I'm from Rochester, so I'm familiar with that area.
Oh, okay.
So what do you have that you want to share today?
Well, I've got a poem called The Gift, and it was inspired by an incident last month before Christmas.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and hear it whenever you're ready.
The Gift. Got a gift from a secret Santa. Someone cares, Santa in secret. Many gifts this season, not from secret Santas, from sisters, BFFs, friends, family, chosen or by birth. Not gifts wrapped in paper, gifts of love, gifts of caring, gifts of friendship, gifts of support, all wrapped in warmth, bright red and royal purple. Tied with ribbons of light, gold, silver, rainbows glowing bright in the winter night. These gifts arrive not just on a moon-bright winter night, given freely all year round. Accept my gifts without obligation of love, friendship, support, caring. Share these gifts with others. The more we receive them, the better we make the world. Happy holidays.
Yeah, thanks. Excellent poem. Excellent reminder for this time of year. Thanks, Branwyn.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. That was Branwyn Drew, and you can see on the website, or on the bottom of the screen there, Branwyn's website if you want to find more. Branwyn Drew, that's BranwenDrew.com. That's where Brandon's artwork is, and then poetry at branwendrew.medium.com. So you can check that out. And that poem was The Gift. So thanks for sharing that. And we'll also add Branwyn to our call list. So glad to have new callers. Always a real pleasure having new voices on the lines here. Let's add Branwyn really quick. Okay. And now we have another first-time caller. Let's do all three of these first-time callers at once. This is a 416. Let's see who we have at 416. Hey, Lisa Allison, I see your email. It's great to talk to you. Again, another poet that we've had in the chats for a long time. It's really cool to hear your voice.
Thank you. It's good to be on.
And where are you calling from?
Toronto, Canada.
Okay. So how are things there in Toronto? Actually, speaking of the COVID, that's one of the places I've been looking at because the Omicron variant got there really early on. Like something from South Africa went right away. Are things sort of... Yeah. Is there any sign that because it peaked so fast in South Africa, is there any sign that it is coming down a little bit in Ontario?
Right. And ironically, I'm from both South Africa and Toronto. I grew up in South Africa. It's not following me, I swear. I don't know about peaking. The numbers certainly yesterday were way higher than before. It seems to be still increasing by about a third every few days. Don't quote me on that. But today was a little bit lessening. But they've stopped the formal testing now for a lot of people. They've just said, if you think you have it, just stay home and bear out the mild symptoms.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad, about as bad as what you guys are going through right now in the States.
Yeah, that's one of the places I keep checking to see, because one of these days I think it's going to be dropping rapidly, because in South Africa it's almost gone already. It moves so fast through the population. Anyway, what poem do you have that you wanted to share today?
So I have a poem about my daughter, and she has autism, and school has been a long process, and she graduated this year and has gone on to college. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And this is from the Lumiere Review?
It's a great quarterly journal online, and it's run by Jessica Kim, and she's just fantastic with her poets and writers and artists who submit to her. She really gives them a lot of showcase on her Twitter feed.
That's very cool. One of the things, I love, showing new journals, because I'm not really familiar with what's going on as far as literary journals are. So every time somebody has a link to share where they can share a poem like this, it's really cool to see and explore the journal a little bit too. So thanks for sharing that. And then I have Spectrum. So go ahead whenever you're ready. I'll put it up on screen.
Okay. Spectrum. My daughter wears my DNA like a casualty, drifts through conversations with melodic logic. When she speaks in the language of our ancestors, I know she's caught something with her mind, a Spinosaurus or a Disney cartoon. She grows deep, a creature of thrum and ashes. When her school day spins bright, she rocks tick-tock to find a kind face, comes home bent with hurt. In the evening, she wraps herself tight in an old breeze, wanders the playground to feast on leftover laughter, lone kisses fallen to the ground. I find her shivering beneath a tree, her skin discarded on a rock. Life after life, she sobs. Too much. I wrap her under my ribs. We dance to the sound of unfurling leaves, sing to the shift of birch bark. She hears everything. I don't call myself an autism warrior. I harbor night creatures whose heads hang low, blood-wet wings stuck to their bodies. By morning, I turn them out. They unfurl and fly. At night, they return. Watch me. Cold planets in my throat.
Oh, that was a beautiful poem and beautifully read. I love that, Lisa. That's Spectrum. Thanks so much for sharing, and I'm so glad you could call in.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Thanks, Tim.
Yep, have a good rest of your Sunday.
Bye now.
Bye. Yeah, that was Lisa Allison with Spectrum. And let me look at the about. This is a really interesting website, too. The brightest literary magazine around, we believe, is amplifying the voices of marginalized writers and artists. And this is Jessica Kim, the founder and editor-in-chief. Very interesting. So find that at Lumiere Review.com. And you can It's on the screen, but if you're just listening, it's LUMIERE, review.com. So find that and find Lisa's poem, a really beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. And now let's move on to... Oh, wait, let me put Lisa Allison on her phone book, too. The open lines, I love when we have new people who haven't called in before. One of the sort of a metric is how many new people I can put in the phone book every week. And that was great. So thanks, Lisa and Peter and Bronwyn. And let's call up on Kimberly McNeil, who's a poet that hasn't been on since last May.
Hello.
Hey, Kimberly, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. I'm just trying to pull up the poem here. I'm a little nervous.
Well, it's great to have you. It's been a while. Where are you calling from again? I don't remember.
Hello.
Hey, Kimberly.
Oh, I hear myself in the background, so mute that or turn off your stream.
Good. I'm just trying to pull up the poem here. Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
I'm
Yeah.
calling from Florida.
Ah, okay. And so you included a picture with this poem. Do you want to explain what the poem is and what the photograph's of?
It's a poem about my father.
So that's your father on the screen. I love his mustache. That's great.
Yeah, he was a total badass.
And for anybody who's just listening, he's got her father with a cool handlebar mustache, and three kids there. Are those your siblings?
Yeah, there's actually 4 of us there. It's me and my brother Kevin, my brother Michael, and my brother Patrick.
Oh, very cool. And so go ahead and read this poem whenever you're ready.
Okay. It's titled Mindfulness of an Enigmatic Individual. Mindfulness. My father comes to mind. He did not gift. Instead, he fixed your bicycle or quoted you accurately, something you said walking away years before. He noticed the invisibles, joined with them at meetings, circling counterclockwise, accomplishing nothing, so that they were not alone. He was consistent yet unconventional. His intensity, so sensitive, so thoughtful, it embarrassed me. I have not met anyone who worked harder. He told me the truth. He would save our mother first if a fire engulfed our house. He kept his cool under fire. He sent me a note the day I wrecked the car. It said, "Don't ignore injury, Kimberly, if you have pain." He delivered meals. He built houses. He volunteered his time, his concentration, and skills. When he laughed, which was rare, sarcasm was absent. His simplicity, his sadness, his failures were there. If I came to my father, found him out in the garage, sweating profusely, profanities aloud, fixing something, his attentiveness to my problems was like worship. He listened carefully, and I cannot remember an instance or an answer of no.
Oh, what a beautiful tribute to your father, Kimberly. That was great. And it struck me as I was listening to that if, your goal in life should be to have somebody write a poem like that about you. That was just beautiful. I mean, thanks so much for sharing that and bringing that as part of the program today.
Sir, my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to read it.
Yeah, definitely a pleasure. And so many great lines in there, too. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kimberly.
Sure.
Bye. That was Kimberly McNeil with Mindfulness of an Enigmatic Individual. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And who are we going to do next? Let's go back down the list. Let's call up Carolyn Codd. And Jackie McManus is here. We'll call up Jackie next. There's going to be another first-time caller, too, with Otter Lake. But right now, let's try the phone. Hey, Karen, this is Tim with Rattle, and you are live on the air. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm okay.
Yeah, good. So what do you have that you would like to share? I see 2 mini poems. Can you describe what they're about a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned I'm not able to participate as much because I go to church on Sunday morning, and it interferes with the time. But I decided to stay home today. So anyhow, this was from the prompt of the winter solstice, and it just made me think more about the beginning of winter. And I grew up in the Northeast, and I lived for a long time also in Illinois. So it's my experience with winter there, and now living in Southern California, the differences. And then the other poem is just from my experience growing up in the real winterlands.
Yeah, well, we're in Southern California too, but up in the mountains, so we have about a foot of snow out. And one of the reasons I moved up here is because I missed the seasons. It felt like the year was just like never ended because there was no change in the weather. So I like it up here myself.
Well, I'm glad to be down lower.
Yeah, I know a lot of people would be. A lot of people up here wish they were down lower right about now. So which one do you want to read first? I have Nostalgia and Reality, and then I have The Winter Garden.
Yeah, I'll read the 2 little ones first.
Okay, sure.
And then go to... So Nostalgia is thoughts of waking up to freshly fallen snow.
That's beautiful.
And then Reality is now... Glad to see the snow only on top of mountains.
Very nice. Yeah, and we're up here with the snow. Yeah.
Yeah, I see your snow up there.
Yeah. And then this other one is Winter Garden. Go ahead with that one too.
Yeah. And so this is my experience growing up with the snow. Walk quietly. It's winter. The garden is sleeping. At times it seems dull and dreary under its blanket of dead, fallen leaves. But on closer look, one sees bright touches of red berries and seeds. With even deeper, colder winter comes a blanket of snow, which falls gently without making a sound, not wanting to wake the sleeping garden. Then, not even storms with howling wind disturb its profound slumber. Snuggling further down under the blanket, the sleeper sleeps on. After a while, a few sunny days, and the daffodils start to stir, peeking up over the blanket. They have little trouble going back to sleep when colder, darker days return, waiting for spring's authentic arrival. In the meantime, a great idea on this cold and cloudy afternoon, a long winter's nap.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that too, Carolyn. It was great to have you on sharing these poems. Really, really wonderful tributes to winter. And I'm glad we could catch you for a live one. Sorry that the show moved to a less convenient time, but I'm glad we could have you now.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks a lot.
Yep, take care.
Okay.
Yep, bye.
Okay, you too. Bye.
That was Carolyn Codd with really 3 poems: Nostalgia and Reality and Winter Garden. Let's see. Let's go down to... We have Mike Bales, we have Bev, Wendell Atherstone, we have Dick Westheimer, and let's do Angela Gartner now. Hey, Angela, how you doing today?
Good. Let me just close you out here.
No problem. Yeah, so how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's a really fun show and fun. I've kind of been spending a lot of time not doing much this last 2 weeks, which is nice. I've been kicking into holiday mode. It's hard to do any work, which kind of feels nice. I needed a break.
Yeah, I know my deadline, the magazine I edit deadline usually ends right before holiday, so I get like kind of a week break now. Now I start back up, really hitting it hard tomorrow. So
Yep, me too. I hear you. So your poem is starting anew. Is there anything you want to say about it?
No, I think I'll just read it. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself.
Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready. I have it up.
Starting anew. And by the way, I just wrote this. I started writing it last night and then I finished it this morning. So
very nice. Hot off the press.
Yeah, it is. Starting anew. I was now stuck in the back seat at the end of a 4-hour car trip. It was a thrown shoe at his head that started the brothers' tussle. My mouth had opened to say, I wasn't ready. It was a sign. We should turn around. I kept hearing his shallow breaths, his head limp, the frozen skin. We were at the double doors with the muffled, excited barking. A face like his great-uncle ran toward us, his leash pulling. The young fur felt different. I held him as we rode home, looking out the window. I felt the small footprint lift an inch off my broken mind.
Oh, that's a beautiful poem. I love that. That was great. So how's it going with the puppy?
It's good. Like because we lost our 11-year-old dog in December 2020. We ended the year there. And then we got our new dog in January. And, I still was feeling very heartbroken about him. And so that was kind of like when we picked him up, I was still feeling like, oh my gosh, maybe we shouldn't do this. But he actually is the great nephew of my new dog, which you probably might have heard, is the great nephew of my dog that passed away. So it's kind of nice that we kind of were able to kind of keep it in the family, but he doesn't act like his great uncle for sure.
Yeah, they all have different personalities, that's for sure. Yeah, we're I've never had to have a dog die, and we have a German Shepherd that we got he's starting to get old. I mean, dogs go quickly, it's tough.
Yeah, and I mean it was like the best thing that happened in 2021, but it's definitely, when we got him, I was still really mourning my other one. And, now that the year has gone by, it's like we've just got closer and closer, because he wasn't a puppy when we got him. He was 1, actually.
Okay.
And it was the same, because when we got our 11-year-old back, he was 1 when we got him. It was kind of, we were meant to have him, but it still was, at the time, I was still upset, but it's they really do fill that hole. The new ones fill the hole, and you never forget the old one, but it definitely helps. And I think I'll never not have a dog. I can't ever. It's like the best. Dogs are the best thing ever. They just heal you really feel like they are your emotional support animals, but you're just, they're giving you so much back, and they, you give them so much, but they give so much back to you that I don't even know if they know it.
Yeah, we always had cats, and And so now we have a dog, and I realize I'm a dog person. I like the dog much better than the cats. No offense to cat lovers or anything, but dogs actually, you can talk to them and they do stuff, and they're much more there than a cat. But anyway, thanks for sharing that memory from 2021, Angela. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and I have a Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
Have a
Happy New Year.
start.
I kind of forgot. Yeah, it is the New Year. Happy New Year, Angela.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Yep,
Thanks.
bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
There's Angela Gardner with starting anew. Let's go to Mike Bales. Oh, and I forgot Jackie McManus. Let's do Jackie too. Then we have Carlton Johnson. I'll read his poem. Ted Guevara's got a poem. Kashiana Singh.
Hello, let me step away from the laptop.
No problem, Mike. It's great to talk to you. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. It's snowing crappy, so I had a different afternoon. I spent like 4 hours, the longest I spent, writing a poem for a website called poetrysoup.com.
Ah, I've heard of that, yeah.
Do you have time for two?
Sure. Well, I don't know. Actually, maybe we should stick it to one. It's already 11. I got a lot of poems. Let's stick it to one, even though some people have read two. Is that okay?
Yeah, I like my Poets Respond poem, but I think I'll do the memory poem, Down Old Fifth Avenue.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
This is when I went to Clinton to do a poetry reading. I'm promoting a book along with others that the Midwest Writing Center put in, and I've got a poem in it. And Clinton's about 40 miles away from here. It's where a getaway, where I used to go run, and usually my dad took me because I didn't want to mess with my own car keys. And I did some flagging for some road work around here, but this just kind of more mentions the running. It's kind of a historical, kind of neat town.
Interesting.
Kind of a little industrial too.
Yeah, I love those kind of places.
You can get a little bit lost in it, which I allude to in the poem. This is called Down Old Fifth Avenue. With great care, I discern avenues from streets, a lesson learned when I was lost and young. Trees on both sides line Fifth Avenue as it angles toward the downtown. Trees bereft of leaves live past the beauty of summer, and solitude of fall's reflections, my reflections of life. Downtown lines of buildings remain, only their faces have changed. I look up and down the block and turn to a clerk in an antique story to tell him stories of what happened in the years I've been gone. A sense of intuition whispers as I look around to see the YMCA, where 40 years ago I finished running a 5-mile race while my father watched. But now he's gone. I park and step to a building, a shop turned into a gallery where friends and I gather to read our works. They turn to me as I stand at the podium, feeling a sense of warmth as I speak in verse and rhyme, possessed by memory and time.
Very cool memory. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right, you too. All right, bye.
And that was Mike Bales with Down Old Fifth Avenue. Great poem. Thanks, Mike, for sharing that. And yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking at the clock, actually. We got to kind of, let's stick to one poem, but we'll get through everybody we have left. But we have to stick to one poem, I think. Let's call it Bev Wendell Atherstone. Bev Wendell Atherstone.
Hello.
Hey, Bev. How you doing today?
Great. How are you today, Tim?
I'm doing great. So what do you have that you would like to share?
Yes, so my poem kind of cuts into two of the areas, the prompt and also the news.
Ah, perfect.
Because you wanted us to talk about a moment we'll never forget.
Uh-huh.
Well, I was thinking the year we'll never forget. And then I saw so much of this Build Back Better meme everywhere. BC, after all the disasters, and then even Canada with the Prime Minister talking about building back better by bringing in more immigrants. Anyway, so it kind of cuts across both.
Interesting. Well, let's hear. Go ahead whenever you are ready.
Ready. Okay. 2021, a year I'll never forget.
a year of chaining climate catastrophes, heat domes, fires, atmospheric rivers, floods, tornadoes, of prairie frozen winter. Extremes just keep growing greater. BC seniors without AC were at risk this summer. Too bad we can't use AC outside on the weather. When hundreds of people died from a heat dome at home, cooling stations were created. Too little, too late for some. Lytton Village broke every heat record and burned once more to the ground. When towns crumpled like dominoes were evacuated one by one. Neighborly communities welcomed in everyone. It rained and it rained. There was no Noah's Ark. Trapped in Sumas, herds swam its once dry ancient lake. Farmers in motorboats pulled lassoed calves, guiding to higher ground both horses and cows. 33 bridges washed away in one day. Trucks stuck not in mud, but in a static supply chain. The BC Lower Mainland suffered empty food shelves, while heavy with waiting container ships sat in the shoals. Heroic road teams slaved 24/7, propping up bridges, recreating connections. 16-wheelers could supply our needs. But what about those who lost everything? Gaps in our thinking, gaps in our planning. Climate change is here. It's no use complaining. Build back better is Canada's new meme. Let's think before we do the same old again.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Bev, 2021, a year I'll never forget. And it is strange that Build Back Better, I don't know if there's a compilation of like all the different politicians around the world using that phrase. It made me wonder who, like what, where did that come from? I mean, I know, in the United States, it was Biden's campaign thing, but everybody's building back
It was Biden,
better.
yeah, Build Back Better, and then suddenly everyone's using it. It's all over the world.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how that spreads. And
Yes.
yeah, great year in review too of all the. It was a year full of news. It felt like to me, but weirdly personally,
Yes.
it felt like it was the last 2 years has been one. So it's a very strange time, I think. But thanks for sharing that and chronicling a lot of the things that happened over the last year.
Thank you so much.
Yep, take care.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That was Bev Wendell Atherstone with 2021, a year I'll never forget. And let's go to, I mentioned Jackie McManus. Let's go to Jackie. She has a poem, Otter Lake. And I think, Jackie, if I remember right, Jackie has a poem in our spring issue, which I'm putting together right now. Let's call up Jackie.
Please leave a message.
We got the voicemail. I'll try Jackie again. Jackie, I'm going to call you up in another couple minutes if you're still listening. So set it to a ring. And I'm confirming. So yeah, we have Jackie McManus is in the Librarian Poets Tribute that's coming out this spring. I want to make sure I was thinking of the right McManus. Okay, so let's go to Richard Westheimer. I think this is, and then we'll call Jackie, and then I have a few poems people asked me to read. So let's call up Richard right now. Hey, Richard, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am, and I'll just run through this because I know you have a list of folks coming, and read my New Year's resolution poem, which was a Poets Respond poem.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, let me pull it up. And so, is there anything you want to say about it? That we don't have to rush that much.
Yeah, well, it kind of it stems from the fact that I've actually never made a New Year's resolution.
Oh yeah.
So these sort of understanding the sort of the grift of New Year's resolutions, at least for me anyway.
Yeah, it's much better to have a system instead of a goal. I think the whole goal-oriented nature of the resolutions are sort of self-defeating. I think that's definitely the case. But it's, an interesting way to look back at what you might do differently.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I will say that when I used to go to a public gym, that I would just avoid it in January.
Oh, really?
It would just be packed, the locker room with people. And then by February 1st, and I talked to the gym manager and he'd say, yeah, we make all our money in annual memberships in January. And then the rest of you come back in February.
That's funny. Yeah, but it makes complete sense. I remember this poem reading the submissions. It was a good one. So go ahead whenever you're ready and resolved for the new year.
Resolved for the new year. I will weigh myself naked. I will not interfere with the moon's orbit. I will clean under my fingernails. I will leave socks on the floor. I will put down the toilet seat. I will not understand grief. I will rail against book burnings. I will remember the dead. I will forget the dead and remember to floss. I won't sunbathe. I will eat bananas. I will remember that bananas are the fruit of conquest. I will still eat bananas. I will doom scroll at least twice a day. I will give up on Twitter. I won't give up on Twitter. I will buy more books than I can read. I will curse Nazis. I will not curse the darkness. I will eat too much bread. I will tell people how degrading the cashew trade is. I will eat a lot of cashews. I will forget birthdays. I will remember the distance from here to the sun. I will wonder at the number of stars. I will poke around numbly for something to do on my phone. I will write checks to the right organizations. I won't respond when they call me to the streets. I will fake caring about football. I will fake not caring about football. I will crave new gadgets. I will be embarrassed about my cravings. I will plant too many tomatoes. I will kiss my wife on that soft place at the nape of her neck. I will stare at her bare shoulders from across the room. I will drink coffee every day. I will have trouble sleeping. I will forget to call my mother-in-law. I will feel badly about it. I will buy stuff I don't need. I will try not to fall into my own gravity well. I will eat a lot of chocolate. I won't be objective about my grandchildren or my poems. I will take rejection personally. I won't take rejection personally.
Yeah, great list poem, Richard. That was resolved for the new year. And I love the way that moves through that list with the rhythms of it and the different turns and twists. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate you.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
Take care. Is that Richard Westheimer, resolved for the new year? Let's call Jackie and see if we can get connected with Jackie this time. Hey, Jackie, you are live on the air. It's great to talk to you.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is the first time we've ever spoken, but we've published you a couple times. So you have a poem forthcoming in the spring issue, which I'm putting together right now. Actually, after we do this podcast, that's what I'm going to be working on this afternoon. So it's cool. Where are you calling from? Yeah, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the Dalles, Oregon. It's about an hour and a half east of Portland.
Ah, yeah, it's a beautiful area. I love that whole area.
It is.
Yeah, we go up there
gorgeous.
Once a year
Yeah.
Because my Megan's parents live up there.
Oh, they do. Yes,
yeah,
it's
well, in a Bend, but so we go up through that area. So this is Otter Lake, which is a poem that sort of relates to that maybe. Do you want to say anything about it?
I would just say that I spend a few months in Wisconsin every summer on Otter Lake at my brother-in-law's, who is listening. Hello, brother-in-law. And this is just a little something that happened last summer. I'll just say that I don't often write hopeful poetry, so this is probably as close as it gets.
That's cool. Yeah, that's something that we really, I keep thinking, especially as we look at more chapbooks to publish and things like that, like having more positive and hopeful things, it's hard to find and really appreciated when we have it. So glad we could hear
comes
this.
Close. I don't know if it's entirely there, but
yeah, well, it's an effort anyway. Let's hear it. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Otter Lake. A bench was bolted to a dock 20 feet from shore, where I sat listening to the sounds a lake can make, slapping gently against the gangway, the downed log, the lily pads. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it wobble in like the seeds of a dandelion on its last wish, as it fell on an edge of the first lily pad it could get to, lifted its tiny hand wing as if it were the weight of lead, the claw of that wing hooked to a helipad of hope. If I had not seen it, I would not have known. Surprise is a brief emotion. I looked away, out toward the long, wide morning to a boat and a man. They circled an old stump in the middle of the lake, trolling. Distance dampened the grinding sound of the motor, its worn bearings, this worn bench, the bat. No one knows what to do with loneliness. A word was in my head, transition, a bat caught between birth and death, good luck, bad luck. Nothing is ever clear. How it had flown in low past the maple and oak, dive-bombed for a lily pad, fell as if it wanted to sit and think for once, without moving, but with fellowship. The bat kept its back to me, wings spread like knife cleats, a marionette, its corrugated body rigid on the disc-shaped leaf. The shoreline looked out at us, the lake listening, a brilliant silence to the day as if conscious, air so humid it had to be swallowed. Did the spider beneath the bench stop breathing, its backdrop of water so blue and smooth as if all we ever had to do was wait? I sat on the bench, the bat on the lily pad. Just then a deluge of waves rolled in from a boat, and a wind and an angler with only a rod and a cross. The lily pad floated in a patch of lily pads, and the bat undulated with them, and then jumped. No, no, I cried aloud, but it was too late. It was gripping with that tiny wing, the crest of a tender wave, pushing it to shore.
Oh, very interesting memory. Thanks so much for sharing that. Very vividly told. Jackie, it's great from Otter Lake. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yep. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. This is Jackie McManus, and let's put Jackie in the phone book as well. So there's four additions to the phone book today. Always love that. Add contact. Jackie McManus. Okay. I'm going to make sure I didn't have any other callers waiting. Okay. I think that's about it for the callers. And then I wanted to read a couple poems for poets who can't call in but wanted to share. This is Carlton Johnson. I hope I... Oh, here it is. There's a Sciku from Carlton Johnson, and he says, the news came out this week that they have finally discovered an actual millipede with over 1,000 feet. Oh, that's interesting. And here's a Sciku. We'll get a Sciku earlier. I got one a little bit in a few minutes. This is Carlton Johnson's Sciku for the actual 1,000-footed millipede. 1,000 feet long, the millipede beneath the outback, one step at a time. 1,000 feet long, the millipede beneath the outback, one step at a time. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that Sciku, Carlton. And let's see. I think Ted Govera wanted me to read a poem for him. Oh, here's another one from Carlton, too. Let me do this one, too. This is Water Elegy, a longer one. This is for the look back at the year. So let's do this one, too. Again, this is Carlton Johnson. 2021, an elegy to water. In its falling down, it precipitates the breaking of my heart and flies skyward or downward in the upside, downside way we are living these days. Water is everywhere and water is nowhere drinkable. From Flint to Navajo Nation, let that sink in. I am an accessory to your demise, dear winter. I have discarded plastics haphazardly bound for some huge mass of yard waste. I have sprayed bug sprays with abandon. Better them than me, or so I thought. Water levels are rising, forming a wet tomb for many coastal homes as cattails grow and encroach the marshes. We have water, but it is dying with lead. Chlorine, mercury, microplastics, pesticides, herbicides, humanicides, leaching from the ground, falling from the sky. The youngster clinging in the blue to his dad's hand demands little more than clean air and clean water, and it is so hard to come by. So is clean living, all that is meant by giving and forgiving, no and forever. We are all guilty of killing water, and water is life as you toss another plastic Dannon container in the trash, where it will sit for hundreds upon thousands of years until some distant descendants return to this land of their forefathers only to discover it is full of plastics, oil, coal ash, and a myriad of non-biodegradable items. As they look at each other, the bubbles of their heads exploding in sadness, how could we have been so short-sighted? Well, thanks for sharing that. Another great poem and a reminder for 2021, An Elegy to Water by Carlton Johnson. Some great lines in there. I really appreciate sharing that, Carlton. And if I can get, let's see if I can get Carla Schwartz's poem in. She sent here we go. She sent an audio file. Hopefully that we can make this loud enough and it'll work. It's a short poem. The moment of, Carla Schwartz says, the moment and days surrounding my father's death is most certainly a poignant event for me of 2021. I'm so sorry to hear your father passed away, Carla. I know we talked about, him being in hospice. So I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry for your loss. This is Death Stepped In. Let's see if we can get this to work. Here we go. So it's not playing. Okay, so I'm just going to read Death Stepped In. Sorry, Carla. For some reason, it's not playing for me. It's not even coming out of my headphones either, so I'm not sure. We'll have to figure it out later. But this is Death Stepped In. Death really did step into the room, a few times teasing and cajoling my father. Sometimes he only spoke Spanish, Death. My father spoke poorly, but he understood. The chairman of the board, he's over there in that chair, behind my right shoulder. He suggested we go downstairs, just stand up and step away from the bed. He makes it sound so easy, dying. But it's not if I have to lie here and run out of breath until my last cough. Lie here and itch this papery cover for my skeleton called skin. It's a beautiful, touching poem, Carla. That was great. Thanks for sharing that. He makes it sound so easy, dying. What a great line that is. Sorry I couldn't get the audio to play. I think it's a problem with the file, actually, because it's only 23 kilobytes, which is smaller than it should be. Here's a short one from Vicky Miko. And Vicky says, happy 2022, happy everything to all my Rattle friends. This is just one of my favorite poems by my favorite poet, Shel Silverstein, from A Light in the Attic. So she's sharing this. If anybody wants to share other things besides their own poems, feel free to do that too. Put something in, a quick poem. This is Shel Silverstein. Put something in. Draw a crazy picture. Write a nutty poem. Sing a mumble-gumble song. Whistle through your comb. Do a loony-goony dance. Cross the kitchen floor. Put something silly in the world that ain't been there before. That's a great advice from Shel and Vicky. Thanks for sharing that, Vicky. And still looking through the mailbag. Still, this is Ted Quavera. He says, mood such as anger and longing is very important in this poem. The twang approach, I don't know how accurate they are, hopefully waters down the politics. It's interesting. So this is Ted Quavera's poem. A Texan recalls the debacle at Karzai. My pleading ain't pretending, but it's a prayer for sure. Ain't no asking for something fancy or worthy cure. Everything's been ached with no sentiment left. I want to holler this way, mind you, every bit of stupid shit. 'Cause common ground's a layman's sin, the wicked side of Joe, one that owns pride, a bit of cleft, has no business doing a foreign job. He ain't that smart. My wife over there could have told you that a la carte. Joe's a junkie, Joe's an embezzler. Why would he crane up precious lives? It ain't because he's old. He needed vocation come the 11th, so he juggled 20 years, including my wife, shoving them all down the drain. Down here, we respect beauty peeling off a determined gale. She must own a heart spread over 2 continents and all, not that she's hiding, she's just aware of many a theft. She understands Joe's rationale, just not his aim. Also, his timing is kind of blunt, picking electric cars over while oil's still flowing, with our jobs and I'm adrift. My wife ain't seen since 2016. We started Skyping a year over. My nephew lessoned me patiently. I called him one night, complaining I ain't connecting. He eased me. She's done left. My pleading ain't pretending, but it's a prayer for sure. If you leave Joe's skull out in the desert, likely it'll stop thinking. Then the country will be better off, 'cause it'll quit the lickin'. My wife of 15 years came home 5 times since. She married me 'cause I'm in a uniform first, and she kept going. She swore she ain't hitched the war, but me didn't know who wanted her more. And that is Texan recalls the debacle at Karzai. And again, I think that was, I should have been reading that in a sort of a southern drawl maybe, but I am terrible at doing stuff like that. We need maybe I need an acting lessons or something, some acting coach. I could definitely do this part of the show better. Let me see if there's anything else you want to share. It's getting way past the cutoff time though. Oh, and Kashiana Singh wanted to share this. A moment of 2021 you will never forget. So I'll do this last poem and then the Sciku really quick, and that'll be it. So she's got the story here. Migrant children report overcrowding, spoiled food, depression in U.S. shelters. This is the, if you can see it, this is the article that she's responding to from June 21st of this year. Migrant children sent to emergency shelters within the United States described crowded living conditions, spoiled food, lack of clean clothes, and struggles with depression, according to 17 testimonials filed in a court case on Monday. So this is the article. This is an article we're looking at from Reuters that Kashiana included with the poem. And this is the poem. Children in cages after Martina Spada's floaters. So here we go. Children in cages after Martina Spada's floaters. What else would you expect of children in cages, playing with balls and dolls, camps turned into witness stands? They encourage the singing of simple songs, gathering their notes in soccer balls and inside limbs of broken dolls. They break back into cages. What else should we expect of children in cages, waiting too long, simmering broth on her stove awaits, and the shadows lengthen. There is nothing to be done. A really important poem to share. Children in cages after Martina Spada's floaters. Thanks for sharing that, Kashiana. And okay, really quickly, because time is about up. This is my Sciku for the week. This is the article. This is from the University of Reading. It's a little gross, to be honest, but it was an interesting article. So this is the news story that caught my eye in the science world this week. Knits on ancient mummies shed light on South American ancestry. And so what these researchers at the University of Reading discovered was that you could actually extract human DNA from the skin fragments trapped inside the glue that head lice use to lay their eggs on human hair. So in the process of sort of gluing these eggs onto human hair, they also trap the little bits of human skin that are on your hair. I guess that would be dandruff, maybe. And you can extract human DNA from that. And it's actually really good. Like one of the best sources of human DNA is from the deep inside teeth bone. You can extract from the marrow there. But you have to like ruin the mummy or the corpse or whatever to do that. And so with this new technique, they can really non-invasively get DNA from ancient remains. So this is kind of fascinating. It's really good for the science research. And they discovered some things already in this one project about how human migration worked. And the fact that these found DNA this way from 3 different sites all over South America, and found that both the humans and the lice had common ancestry DNA really recently, which means there's a lot of migration. They weren't isolated into one area in South America. So that is the interesting little piece of science news this week. And here is my Sciku. Scratching at our history, knit cap. Scratching at our history, knit cap. That is my Sciku for today, and that is your show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. I think it's been a great one. A lot of excellent poems, really interesting discussion with Amanda. Good poems to start off the show. It's been a good episode all the way around. Thanks so much for joining me. Now, next week's prompt on the Rattlecast, and hopefully I'll actually write a poem. I'm gonna work on it harder. I promise. Is right here. Write a poem about a place you've always wanted to visit. Be as specific as you can, i.e. the Louvre, rather than just Paris, France. So write a poem about a place you've always wanted to visit. That is your prompt for next week. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Grant Quackenbush. This is going to be interesting. Grant has a new book, which maybe is his only book. He was the author of that poem we published on Monday from the fall issue. That was the last poem I'll ever write, that double Asabirdarian? How do you say that? Whatever it is, the double whatever, where the poem runs through the alphabet. Asabirdarian? Is that what it's called? Something's wrong with that word. Anyway, he wrote that poem, and you know, it's one of those poems where this is a topic that, I don't know, we don't talk about much, but the industry nature of poetry and the MFA programs and stuff, it touched on all that and how disaffected he was by the literary community, I guess, was the topic of this poem, which the book builds into, and he claims it's the last poem he's ever going to write. So I don't know if that's the case. We'll talk about that and talk about all the things surrounding that in his book Off Topic, which is actually a really well-written book of poems, so I hope it's not his last, but we'll see. That is Rattlecast 126 with Grant Quackenbush, January 9th. Sunday, as always, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll see you then. Hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll see you for the critique of the week and all that stuff. Talk to you soon. Goodbye.